On the most basic level, a pant leg is just a tube. Something like this. But of course, we have two legs, which means we need two tubes. The immediate challenge this presents is that these two tubes are only going to go up to roughly our undercarriage, if you will. Somewhere about here. And of course, we want them to go all the way up to here. To overcome this challenge, we simply cut a U shape at the top of our cylinder here, which looks something like this. We go ahead and we do that on both leg panels. That's a bit of a side view there. And then those two get sewn together like that. Looking at it as a whole, we have ourselves a very rudimentary basic pair of pants. Looking at it from the top down in, pants are simply two cylinders with a U-shaped hole in the middle to connect them. But of course, our bodies aren't just a case of two cylinders. There's quite complex shapes involved, so let's keep refining this until we get to the pattern that we all recognize. Also, my name's Cornelius Quiring. That's my logo. That's my word mark. So returning to our little model here, the hip area seems to be much too thin, and then we have these super wide, large legs. So we need to taper the shape of each one of these cylinders. Moving forward, I'm going to just demonstrate one leg because these are literally just mirrors of each other. Now, if I go ahead and unravel that cylinder, we end up getting the U shape cut in half on each side. And to create that taper, I could technically just bring it in on each side here, which would mean that we're doing all the tapering on the inside of the leg. And technically we could do that, but that's going to create quite a wide stance because, well, the taper is going to be like that and the leg panels point out like that, and we want to straighten them out a little bit more like that. So I'm going to cut a line right down the middle, and we now have two pieces, which just so happens to be the two leg panels that we need. We've got the front leg panel here and the back leg panel there. And now I can add a taper to the outside of the leg, which is actually on the inside here. And then I can add the taper on the inside of the leg right here, which is on the outside of the pattern. I've gone ahead and just drawn those lines in to demonstrate what I'm going to take off. And while we're trimming things in here, we might as well then curve the top here as well like this, because we don't have perfectly straight hips to waist. Our hips are always the widest, and then it tapers in for the waist for the most part. Something like this. A little bit of snip snip later, and we end up with these two pieces here. And I think for the first time, this is now starting to resemble a traditional pant pattern. I've gone ahead and connected those pieces together, and we end up with this shape. There's that nice taper running down the legs, and then it curves up and in for the hips there. And flip that a little bit. This, of course, is for our undercarriage. And speaking of undercarriage, there seems to be one particular thing missing here, which is space for our tuchus, our rear end. So now we need to challenge that aspect. And to do this, I need to first demonstrate the power of the triangle. But before we do that, let's save some coins. Save 10% on your next fabric order over at Fabric LA with my coupon code CORNQ at checkout. They've got a great selection of knits. Maybe you're thinking felts. They've got you covered. Oh, but you got bold ideas. You want some faux fur. Well, wouldn't you know it, it's one of their specialties. If you got any questions, just reach out to Emery and his team and they'll get you sorted out. Fabric LA. So I've got this square piece of paper here. It's very flat. It has absolutely no volume to it. Then I take that same square, same size, except I jam a triangle right into the middle. I'm going to go ahead and overlay this puppy on top of the other one. I'm going to go ahead and smush these far edges down to try and flatten it out back to the shape of a square. If I go ahead and turn that sideways, it's hard to do with such flimsy paper, but follow me here. If I go ahead and smush that flat, turns out you just got to tape it. The original one is still very much flat, but this new one here has a real bow to it. It's added all sorts of volume to it. You see? Which, that curve very much mirrors what we're trying to add to our pants. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that exact same principle to the back leg panel in the butt area. I'm going to add in a triangle. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim a straight line across, like that. And then using the outside corner as a pivot here, I'm going to go ahead and turn that as much as I need to add as much volume as I need for my butt. I add some paper underneath to fill in that gap, of course. I'm going to tape it all down. And then I can clean up this outside curve here. And also on the outside seam here, I'm going to go ahead and straighten that out because, well, of course, we don't want a divot like this here and we don't want jaggedy edges. Just like that. I should have done it the other way so I remain consistent. But here we are, so that's going to get flipped underneath. And it looks something like this. Now when I get to combining these two pieces together, this of course is going to get straightened out a little bit, like that, which as you can see, adds that volume for the butt area. You see? And these shapes are starting to get quite complex, so I'm going to switch over to a fabric version. And there we go. Oh, hold on, this is not standing so well. Okay. And there we go. This is the front of the pants, and it's fairly straight here and then curves down and around like this. And then as we get to the back here, we now have this curve that goes down under our butt, around the back, and then back in again as we get to our waist area. In fact, editing Corn, if you could overlay a sort of line illustration of a typical torso inside of here to really sort of demonstrate how that reflects the shape of our bodies. Nice. And then if you've been keenly paying attention, you'll notice I added in one other thing here, which if we spin around to the back, I've added this dart in the back here. And essentially what that does is just help to further gather the fabric for the top of our butt here to go up and over. In fact, it actually helps to look at it from the outside seam angle. See how it's curving in real nice here? But also to taper in the panel so that it goes up to our lower back like so. I've gone ahead and drawn the dart on the back pattern piece here. And that is the completed front and back panels for a pant pattern, and hopefully explains why they typically have a shape that looks somewhat like this. And with this new knowledge we've gained, we can now go ahead and draft our own custom patterns based on our own measurements, and well, wouldn't you know it, just so happen to have a course all about this topic available at this URL right here, or click the link down in the description. Take a little break here. We've been doing a lot of learning and have a little gander behind the scenes. This video has been surprisingly quick to film, but that's because I spent all of yesterday cutting up paper samples here and taping them together, sewing stuff, just planning it all out. And I don't think it'd be possible without the support of these wonderful people. And not only that, they get exclusive content, they get to participate in the group chat, and a giant thank you to everyone who supports what I do. Also, Corn, I see noticing that the rolls of paper are still stacked on the side there. You're still not going to tell us what's going on? And understanding these principles also helps us to then very easily edit our pant patterns to fit it better. And the most difficult part to edit is usually these curves right here. In general, sort of the top region, because, well, this is where all the shapes are and where all the movement happens. So I want to focus for a moment just kind of explaining all these bits. Starting off in the front here, and say, for example, we're getting a little bit of a camel toe happening. Well, in that case, we're simply going to go ahead and just cut this curve a little bit deeper right there so it isn't cutting into us. Or alternatively, if it's a little loose and baggy in this area, well, then we're just going to make this curve at the front here a little bit more shallow. It really is that simple. Perhaps we're trying to accommodate a little bit of a tummy. Well, then we just take that same triangle principle we used in the back and do the same thing with the front panel. And so what that's going to do is simply bring this curve here out a little bit like this, and then this line's going to be a little bit more angled forward like that. And then moving on to the back here, let's say, for example, our pants are giving us a little bit of a wedgie. Well, in that case, we're just going to cut that back curve a little bit deeper in. Or vice versa, if we're getting some unwanted lines and pulling and folds down underneath there, well, then we can just make that curve a little bit shallower. Now, say, for example, there's sagginess for the butt. Well, in that case, we want this whole area to have less volume. And so as you recall earlier where we added that triangle, well, then we're just going to reduce the shape of that triangle. Or perhaps we're looking to accommodate a bit more volume in the back here for a bigger butt, well, then we just go bigger with that triangle. And then finally, we can of course increase or decrease the height of this curvature if we want. Say, for example, that they're just riding up and in all around, well, then we're just going to make this curve deeper. Or vice versa, if they're sagging a little bit, well, then on the pattern, we just make this curve a little bit more shallow. I think seeing a pattern like this really just helps illuminate what those curves actually mean. And wouldn't you know it, I just so happen to have a course dedicated to altering pant patterns as well.